At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's I Am Duck. Let's begin. Whispers began things, the Sorroth way. On the pristine mute bridge of the warship Inevitable, Prime Apex Saurus watched a single, elegant bolt of blue-white plasma cross the starless gulf. The bridge held only the sterile hum of life support and the soft, melodic chime of a weapon system reporting a successful discharge. The plasma arced, a tool of calculated force. It bloomed against the distant hull of the human vessel, a craft of crude alloys and exposed conduits, a silent flower of incandescent energy. Saurus's thin mouth curved. The tactical doctrine was clear. A single disabling shot to the engines, followed by a generous offer of surrender. The humans would be awed by their power, grateful for their mercy. He anticipated their compliance, a perfect calculation, and as always, a wrong one. The bridge of the human prospecting ship, the Audacity, erupted into a glorious, unapologetic symphony of chaos. The plasma hit arrived as a full-throated, heavy metal scream that tore through the deck plates. The impact threw Captain Kyra Navarre against her command chair's restraints with enough force to click her teeth. A geyser of orange sparks erupted from a secondary comms console, showering the compartment with the sharp, acrid scent of superheated ceramic and melting plastic. Red emergency lights flashed, painting the bridge in frantic, pulsing shades of crimson. "Damage report!" Navarre snapped, her voice cutting through the cacophony of alarms with the clean edge of a sharpened blade. She gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white, but her eyes, dark and focused, held a chilling calm. Max Mac Carver's voice, a gravelly mix of static and pure sarcasm, crackled over the eternal comms. "She ate it, Captain. Slagged the hour of hell on deck for her, but the bones are good. I'm rerouting power from the damn coffee maker to reinforce the inertial dampeners. We're green for combat ops, if you call this combat and not suicidal flailing." Gia Lee, the ship's tactical and communications officer, gripped her console like a life raft in a hurricane. Her fingers jabbed and swiped across the holographic command screen, her young face tight with concentration. "They're on a standard disable and capture firing pattern, Captain. Textbook Omega 9. Predictable. They expect us to roll over." Navarre's lips, once a thin, hard line, curled into a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. A wolf might offer the same smile before tearing at her throat. "Good. Let's be unpredictable. Gia, give them pattern scythe." Gia's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Then her expression hardened into pure focus. Pattern scythe existed in no official tactical manual. Navarre cooked it up over a bottle of cheap Martian whiskey, a sequence of railgun shots designed for maximum psychological shock over optimal energy expenditure. "Aye, Captain. Loading scythe." "Mac," Navarre said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial growl that made her hair on Gia's neck stand up. "Time to arm the welcoming party. All contingencies." She'd given Mac carte blanche years ago with a simple directive: make the ship mean. She never asked for specifics. She just trusted the paranoia. Now she bet all their lives on it. A crackle of static preceded a sound that might have been a knuckle, or perhaps just a dying capacitor. "Music to my ears, Skipper. Waking the grumpy kids now." On the bridge of the Inevitable, Sub-Apex Volan, Saurus's second-in-command, monitored the battle screen with a growing sense of unease. "Prime Apex," he reported, his voice a model of Saurith calm, yet tinged with a faint note of confusion. The human vessel broadcast no surrender signal. Instead, their primary weapon charges, a crude magnetic accelerator by its energy signature. Saurus waved a dismissive three-fingered hand. "A final, futile gesture of defiance, expected from such a chaotic species. Let them fire their metal chunk. Our particle shields will atomize it 1,000 kilorads from our hull. The tactical officer's facial plate shifted, a subtle sign of distress. Prime Apex. Multiple inbound contacts, no energy signature. They are solid matter, 3 of them. Their velocity is extreme. Before Cyrus could process the sheer absurdity of the statement. Solid matter? Fired from a ship? An archaic gunpowder weapon? 3 hypervelocity tungsten slugs, each the size of a ground car and moving at blistering 100 kilometers per second, slammed into their portside shield array. A violent concussive shudder rocked the soundless bridge, a tremor that felt less like an impact and more like a tectonic shift. Alarms, once soft and melodic, shrieked with a piercing, panicked intensity Cyrus only read about in historical archives. The holographic screen flickered violently as the port shield, designed to repel elegant streams of plasma, overloaded catastrophically against the sheer brutal kinetic force. 3 deep, molten trenches gouged the ship's mirror-perfect hull, the superheated armor plating glowing a furious, angry red. Navarre watched the damage report flicker across her screen. The Sorith shield flared like a dying star before collapsing. The slugs hit home. A good start. That got their attention, Jaya said, a hint of awe in her voice. Their shield frequencies are unstable. Good, Navarre said. Now let's be rude. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on the holographic schematic of the Sorith fleet. The flagship, the Inevitable, was flanked by 2 smaller escort vessels. They held a perfect, disciplined arrowhead arrangement, a fatally perfect arrangement. Jaya, main railgun, target the flagship's primary communications mast. A disabling shot. I want them cut off from their little friends. The order was tactically bizarre. The mast was a small, non-critical target that would inflict no real damage to the ship's combat ability. Locking solution, she confirmed, her fingers moving in a swift, deliberate sequence. A 1 in 1,000 shot at this range, Captain. Then make it a good one, Navarre replied calmly. The entire frame of the Audacity vibrated with a deep, resonant clump clang. As the main railgun fired again, the slug was a silver needle streaking across the black canvas of space. On the Inevitable, a low hiss escaped Cyrus's lips. Rage, cold and absolute, tightened its grip. The humans returned fire and damaged his ship. His perfect, immaculate vessel. The pride of the Third Fleet now bore 3 ugly scars from its flank. An intolerable violation. They dare, he hissed, his voice trembling with fury. They dare defile the collective's might with their filthy kinetics. Prime Apex, Volin interrupted, his voice tight. The second projectile. It targets neither our weapons nor our engines. Its trajectory is high. The slug, guided by Jaya's meticulous calculations and a healthy dose of pure human malice, sheared through the Sorith ship primary communications mast. The elegant spire of woven alloy sensor arrays and broadcast antennas vanished, vaporized in an inaudible flash of kinetic energy. A tactical slap in the face, a gesture of profound contempt, screamed across the dark. We see you, we know what you are, and we are unimpressed. For a full 5 seconds, the Sorith bridge fell utterly still, save for the wail of the damage alarms. The crew stared at their flickering displays, unable to comprehend the sheer, unmitigated audacity. Cyrus's mind raced, searching for a counter-strategy. Doctrine 11B, pacification of aggressors, useless. Subsection Gamma, response to kinetic threats. It contained 2 paragraphs on museum piece orbital cannons. His entire tactical education evaporated in the span of 5 minutes. Cyrus's expression settled into one of cold fury. The textbook was useless. Sub-Apex Volin, he snarled, his voice low and venomous. Deploy the boarding teams. Now! I want their captain brought to me in chains. I will flay the insolence from their hide myself. Volan hesitated, a flicker of logic fighting the tide of his commander's rage. Prime Apex, their bridge is too heavily shielded for a stable transit lock. Tactical suggests we secure a larger, less defended section first. Their main cargo bay is optimal, according to our initial scans. Saurus waved a dismissive hand, his eyes burning holes in the image of the human ship. Then do it. Swiftly. End this farce. Deep in the guts of the Audacity, in the greasy humming heart of engineering, Mac Carver perched at a grimy, hardened terminal bolted directly to the ship's frame. He gnarled fingers a blur across chunky physical keys. His paranoia had led him to spend a decade rerouting the ship's very architecture to become a weapon. He pulled a schematic onto his screen, a schematic no one, not even Navarre, had ever seen in its entirety. It was labeled simply, Contingency, Unwelcome Guests. Max spent 10 years on the Audacity, 10 years of long, mind-numbing transits through empty sectors where his only companion was the ship itself. Mac's version of tinkering involved a healthy dose of extreme, obsessive paranoia. Right then, you bastards, he muttered to the empty engine room, his voice a low growl. Let's see how your fancy teleporters handle a bit of good old-fashioned hospitality. With a series of commands, he shunted power from non-essential life support in the vacant lower decks directly to the internal grav-plating systems in the main cargo bay and the connecting maintenance corridors. His screen showed the grav field generators normally humming along at a steady 1.0 G, spiking into the red. Let's see how their fancy boots handle a few G's of unexpected up. He grunted, a malicious glint in his eye. He then glanced at the pressure readings for the primary coolant lines that snaked through the service junctions. A new, even more vicious plan already formed in his head. He brought the systems online, a faint predatory smile on his face. The welcome mat was out. In a soundless, shimmering flash of folded light, a dozen Sorith Marines materialized in the Audacity's main cargo bay. Their sleek silver armor was immaculate, a fusion of form and function. Their plasma rifles held at a flawless ready position, hummed with contained power. They were the elite shock troops of the collective, warriors who had pacified 100 worlds without ever receiving a scratch on their polished armor. The tactical perfection of their teleportation immediately gave way to a disorienting, alien reality. They found themselves in a vast, dark, cavernous space that smelled of machine oil, cold metal, and something vaguely like burnt coffee. The chamber was a claustrophobic maze of massive, magnetically clamped shipping, containers, and hulking dormant pieces of mining equipment. An eerie quiet filled the area, broken only by the faint, rhythmic hum of the ship's life support. They expected the clean, well-lit corridor of a warship. They found an industrial junkyard floating in space. The squad leader, Blade Primus Lurin, scanned the area. His sensor feed was a mess of ghost signals and magnetic interference from the massive metal objects surrounding them. The environment was chaotic, unacceptable. Advance, he ordered through their private comms channel. Pattern Delta. Secure the primary access corridor. We move for the engine room. Cautiously. The squad advanced with the flawless, synchronized discipline that had conquered empires. They flowed between the containers like silver ghosts, their plasma rifles sweeping every shadow. They were perfect soldiers in an imperfect world. The lead Marine's foot fell on a specific floor panel, one imperceptibly scored compared to the others. Mac had dropped a heavy wrench there 2 years ago. He decided then it was the perfect spot for a pressure plate. Instantly, the main bay lights died, plunging the vast chamber into absolute blackness. Before the Sorith's optical sensors could adjust, the flashing strobes of red emergency beacons began to flash, bathing the scene in disjointed, nightmarish flashes of light. With the deafening clang of a guillotine, heavy blast doors slammed down at the front and back of the wide maintenance corridor the squad had just entered, sealing them in a metal tomb. Before they could register the trap, hidden Panels in the corridor wall slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Human crew members, prospectors, geologists, and mechanics in greasy overalls leaned out, their faces grim. They held no plasma rifles or laser pistols. They held industrial grav rifles, tools designed for moving small asteroids. They opened fire. The weapons fired no projectiles, no beams of light. They projected focused cones of intense chaotic gravitational force. The air in the corridor warped and twisted. The Sarath were violently ripped from their feet, their elegant combat training rendered utterly useless. One moment they were perfect soldiers, next they were helpless ragdolls tossed about in a zero-G blender. Their disciplined arrangement shattered as they tumbled helplessly, slamming into the ceiling, floor, and each other with brutal force. They became easy targets for the human crew, who, braced against the walls, simply had to point and shoot. The Sarath's perfect silver armor clumped like tinfoil under the unnatural crushing gravity. On the bridge of the inevitable, Prime Apex Sarath stared at the battle screen, his facial plates clamped so tight they ached. The life sign indicators for boarding Team Alpha winked out, one by one, like extinguished candles. Team Beta, which boarded near the ship's aft, was pinned down and reporting what their panicked leader called spatial distortion anomalies. Team Gamma, which targeted a midship engineering section, had simply vanished. Their telemetry, their life signs, their comms link, all gone in an instant. The data defied all strategic models. These outcomes appeared in none of the Sarith military exhaustive combat simulation archives. Aggressors fought with predictable ferocity, or they broke and fled with predictable cowardice. They fought within established parameters. This was something else. Prime Apex, Sub-Apex Volan reported, his voice strained with a nervousness dangerously close to breaking through his disciplined facade. Their internal defenses are unconventional. Our strategic doctrines are ineffective. I advise we pull back and bombard the vessel from a safe distance. Sarath silenced him with a venomous glare. Bombard them, and admit a dozen of the collective's finest were defeated by a rusted cargo hauler. Unacceptable. They are humans with crude slug throwers. Their initial success is an anomaly, a statistical improbability that will be corrected. His voice rose, filled with the unshakable conviction of a zealot. Overwhelm them with numbers. All remaining boarding teams deploy at once. Find different access points. Secure that vessel. I want its captain's head on my command console by their next rotation. This was exactly what Carter waited for. He watched on his security monitors as multiple shimmering lights appeared throughout the ship. The Sarath, in their predictable arrogance, tried to splinter the human defense by attacking everywhere at once. They poured into service junctions, maintenance crawl spaces, even the mess hall. Big mistake, Shiner boys, Carver muttered, cracking his knuckles. In engineering, Carter became a conductor, and his orchestra was about to play a symphony of pure chaos. He slammed his fist on a large red-painted valve control. Deep within the ship's bowels, a primary coolant line ruptured on his command, venting a massive cloud of supercooled, near-absolute zero fluid into a service junction where a Sarath squad just materialized. Their last transmission was a choked cry as they, liquid nitrogen-like substance, flash-froze them in their polished armor, turning them into a silent, brittle sculpture of silver and ice. Next, he rerouted a primary power conduit, shunting a lethal surge of several thousand amps directly to the electrified deck plates in a maintenance crawl space. The Sarath squad that appeared there was electrocuted before their boots fully settled on the floor. Their life signs vanished from the Sarath battle screen without a single shot fired. But Carver's magnum opus, his Mona Lisa of malicious engineering, he reserved for the mess hall. As a squad of a dozen Sarath Marines materialized near the galley, their plasma rifles sweeping the empty tables, Carver hit the detonator. He had repurposed a small mining charge, designed for cracking asteroids instead of high explosives. He packed it with several 100 pounds of industrial-grade ball bearings, and for good measure, an entire rack of dinner plates, coffee mugs, and cheap metal cutlery from the galley. The charge detonated with a thunderous crack. The mess hall transformed into a whirlwind of ceramic and steel shrapnel. The sheer volume of low-tech, high-velocity projectiles shredded the Sarath armor, a material designed to dissipate the coherent energy of a plasma bolt. Notwithstand a hailstorm of dinnerware, the last report from the squad leader, broadcast on an open channel in his dying moments, was a choked, utterly bewildered cry of, "We're being shredded by sharpened metal food spears!" On the bridge of the inevitable, Soros stared at the garbled translation on his console. It read, "Attacked by culinary weapons." His mind refused to process the words. Before he could demand clarification, a new sound blared through their ship's communication system. The human tactical officer Jaya had found the command frequency. She was not hailing them. She was not demanding the surrender. She broadcasted a 30-second audio file on a continuous, deafening loop. It was the raw, guttural, terrifying roar of a Terran grizzly bear. The sound conveyed nothing of communication or warning. It projected only pure, mindless biological rage. To the Sarath, a species that engineered emotion out of their evolution in favor of perfect logic, it was the most terrifying sound they had ever heard. This was pure, unhinged psychological warfare, an auditory assault designed to shatter the cold, sterile logic of the Sarath mind. It was working. On the Sarath bridge, undisciplined officers flinched, their facial plates clicking in distress at the sheer animalistic fury pouring from their speakers. On the bridge of the Audacity, Jaya read her opponent through the data. The panic and uncertainty of the first few minutes were gone, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. She was in the zone. "Captain," she said, her voice sharp and exact, "they're overcorrecting. Their pride makes them aggressive. The flagship, the Inevitable, is breaking its position and moving closer, trying to bring its point defense cannons to bear on us. They're entering the densest part of the asteroid field, ignoring their own sensor interference warnings." A dangerous feral light appeared in Navarre's eyes, a predator's light. "Perfect," she breathed. "He's angry, and angry people make mistakes." She leaned forward, her voice dropping low. "Jaya, take us into the thick of it. Play wounded. Vent the reserve plasma coolant from the aft manifold. Make it look like a catastrophic engine breach. Let's give the big angry man a target he can't resist." "Aye, Captain." Jaya said, a grim smile of her own touching her lips. Faking her own death. Classic. The Audacity lurched, its maneuvering thrusters firing in a seemingly panicked, uncontrolled burst. A moment later, a brilliant, harmless cloud of glowing green plasma erupted from its main engines, venting into the darkness. To the Sarath senses, it looked exactly like a catastrophic failure of a warp core containment field. The human ship, seemingly crippled, drifted helplessly, its trajectory carrying it behind a massive iron-rich asteroid the size of a small moon. On the Inevitable, Soros saw his moment of victory. The human ship was finally dying. The bare raw cutout replaced by static. Their defiance was spent. He would have his pride. "The humans are crippled," he announced, a triumphant sneer in his voice. "Their engine core is breached." "Prime Apex," Volan pleaded, his voice now openly frantic. "The nebula's interference is at maximum in that sector. The asteroid is rich in ferrites. It will blind our primary senses. We are detecting gravitational anomalies. Sensor ghost—" "Silence!" Soros roared, his patience finally snapping. He would not be denied his kill. "All power to forward engines. We will pursue. I will finish this ship personally." He made his final mistake. He ordered the Inevitable to follow, to plunge into the sensor-blinding chaos of the asteroid field. Chasing a ghost. Hidden from sight behind the massive asteroid, the bridge of the Audacity was taut with high-stakes focus. "He's taking the bait," Jaya reported, her eyes glued to her passive sensors. "He's coming around the asteroid, fast." "Mac, are you ready?" Navarre asked, her voice calm. "Ready as I'll ever be." The engineer's voice crackled back. "The main mining harpoon is loaded and locked on target. You give the word and I'll give this old girl the kick of her life." The target was not the Sarath ship. It was the asteroid they hid behind. "Fire harpoon," Navarre commanded. With a deafening thunk that resonated through the entire hull, the main magnetic mining harpoon fired. The massive projectile attached to a kilometer-long tether of carbon nanofiber slammed into the surface of the iron-rich asteroid, its magnetic clamps engaging with enough force to anchor a small city. "We're anchored," Mac yelled over the comms. "Now I'm shunning every last watt of available power to winch motor and starboard thrusters. Hold on to your fillings. This is going to be a rough one." As the sleek, elegant form of the Inevitable majestically rounded the asteroid, its weapons ports open and glowing, expecting a helpless, dying target, Navarre leaned into her microphone. Her voice was as cold and hard as the space outside. "Engage." Max slammed his fist down on a large, greasy activation panel. The tether went taut. The winch motor shrieked as it engaged, and Max simultaneously fired the starboard maneuvering thrusters at maximum overload, using the asteroid as an unmovable pivot point. The Audacity wrenched into a brutally tight turn, its frame screaming as it changed vector at a rate that should have torn it to scrap metal. On the bridge, the crew slammed sideways into their crash couches with bone-crushing force. The deck plates vibrated so intensely their jaws clenched, and the low groaning of stressed metal became a high-pitched shriek. The lights flickered and dimmed as the ship diverted every last amp of power to the maneuver, and the taste of copper filled their mouths. "Inertial dampeners at 300% capacity and failing," Jaya shouted, her voice strained, a trickle of blood running from her nose. "Structural integrity alarms on all decks. We're tearing ourselves apart, Captain." "Steady as she goes," Navarre grunted, fighting to stay conscious against the crushing lateral G-forces. The Audacity, battered and screaming, completed its brutal pivot. It burst from behind the asteroid at an angle the Sarith's tactical computers deemed a physical contradiction. For a single horrifying split second, the two ships were nose to nose, separated by less than a kilometer of empty space. The Sarith bridge crew could have counted the scorch marks on the human ship's hull. They stared, frozen in a state of pure, uncomprehending shock. "Jaya," Naval gasped. "Fire everything." The Audacity's railguns, with no need for long-range accuracy, fired in a sustained, continuous point-blank volley. This was an execution. The storm of tungsten slugs was too close and too fast for the Sarith's shields to react. The projectiles punched through the elegant, unarmored hull of the Sarith flagship as if it were paper. The slugs tore through the ship, detonating the flagship's bridge, its primary engine core, and its main plasma weapon arrays in a series of catastrophic, internal explosions that blossomed silently in the vacuum of space. The bridge of the Inevitable ceased to exist. One moment it was the pristine command center of an empire. The next it was a vacuum-exposed ruin of shattered holographic displays, twisted metal, and the instantly frozen bodies of its crew. Prime Apex Saurus lay dying, his perfect uniform torn and bloodied, his arrogant eyes wide with a final, uncomprehending shock. His last sight, before the dark claimed him, was the ugly scarred human ship gliding past his ruined vessel, its silhouette framed by the soundless, blossoming fire of his own engines. The Sarith's fleet command structure had been decapitated in a single brutish and utterly inconceivable blow. Chaos. Absolute, unmitigated chaos. The two remaining Sarith escort ships were now completely rudderless. They spent their entire existence receiving flawless orders from a prime apex. Without one, they were just two ships full of terrified soldiers who had just witnessed the entire reality shatter. Naval wasted none of their confusion. She was bruised, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but her mind was a razor. "Jaya, targets of opportunity," she ordered, her voice rasping but firm. "The two escorts, strip their drives and their primary weapon emitters. Disable, not destroy. I want them to run home. I want them to have a story to tell." Jaya, now fully in her element, was no longer a cadet. She was a veteran, forged in the crucible of this single brutal engagement. Her eyes held a cold fire, as she called out targets with a chilling focus. Port escort attempts to power its FTL drive. A foolish move. Firing solution locked, stripping their engines now. The thump clang of the railgun was the only sound on the bridge. The tungsten slug, fired with meticulous aim, tore away the escort's engine housing and sent it spinning helplessly. Starboard escort turns to engage. Predictable anger response, Jaya noted, a voice devoid of emotion. Targeting their main plasma cannon, firing. Another thump clang. The second escort's primary weapon exploded in a silent puff of vaporized components. The ship, now disarmed and crippled, turned, its tactical perfection shattered. Aboard that lead escort, the terrified sub-apex Volan, now the highest-ranking officer in the shattered fleet, stared at the battle screen. The icon for the inevitable was gone, replaced by a blinking red symbol that meant catastrophic hull breach, all hands lost. He looked at his own ship's damage report. He looked at the other escort, drifting without engines. He looked at the human ship, battered and venting atmosphere, but still very much alive, its railgun glowing hot. He gave the order he should have given an hour ago, the order Soreth would have had him executed for. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with a profound soul-crushing shame he knew would haunt his caste for generations. Emergency retreat. All ships withdraw. Signal the collective. Signal them that doctrine has failed. The broken Soreth vessels, one limping, one under auxiliary power, turned and fled into the swirling dust of the nebula, leaving their dead, their pride, and their flagship behind. Silence finally descended upon the bridge of the Audacity, a heavy ringing silence broken only by the hum of emergency power, the hiss of a few small fires being extinguished by automated systems, and the ragged breathing of the crew. The bridge was a wreck. Consoles sparked feebly. The main view screen was a spiderweb of cracks, but they were alive, bruised, exhausted, some of them bleeding, but alive. Mac's voice, wary but laced with a deep, rumbling satisfaction, came over the comms. "She's hurt bad, Captain. Structural integrity is a goddamn mess, and we're venting Atmo on 3 decks. Half my systems are held together with prayer and industrial tape, but the reactor's stable, and the engine still beats." He paused. "The old girl will get us home." Naval closed her eyes for a single long moment. She took a deep breath, the air thick with the smell of her victory, hot metal and blood. She opened them and looked at her crew. She saw Jaya, her face stained with sweat and dried blood, but her eyes holding a new, unshakable confidence. She saw the green lights of Mac's engineering board, a testament to his stubborn genius. They survived. They won. She leaned forward toward the one comms panel that was still fully functional. Its flickering holographic light illuminated her face. "Jaya," she said, her voice quiet, "isolate the retreating Soreth fleet's emergency frequency. Patch me through." "They're broadcasting a distress call to their command," Jaya said, surprised. "Patching you in, Captain. Miles and light seconds away." On the bridge of the retreating Soreth escort, Volan was in a state of controlled panic, dictating his damage report, trying to formulate words to explain the inexplainable. Then a new voice cut through the static of his own comms, a human voice. The voice was neither shouting nor gloating. It was calm, cold, and it carried across the dark like a shard of ice. "This is Captain Kyra Navar of the human prospecting ship Audacity. Your ambush has failed." She paused, letting the silence stretch between the ruined fleets, a silence filled with the ghosts of 200 Soreth dead and the shattered remnants of an empire's arrogance. Volan felt a cold dread wash over him, a dread far deeper than the fear of battle. Then the human captain delivered the final blow, a simple statement that was also a curse. "Next time, you'll need more ships." The transmission ended. Volan stood frozen on his bridge, the human's words echoing in the sudden profound quiet. He heard no taunt. He heard a statement of fact. He pulled up the sensor replay one last time, his eyes drawn to the brutal physics-defying pivot maneuver. It was an act of such violent, unscientific desperation that it shouldn't have worked. It was an act of madness, a winning act of madness. He realized in that moment of terrible clarity they had not been fighting a known species. They had been fighting something far more dangerous. They had kicked a hornet's nest they never knew existed, a nest built in a rusty bucket of a ship. And the hornets were made of malice, ingenuity, and solid iron. The human's words echoed in the silent bridge, not as a threat, but as a prophecy. The age of Sorith invincibility was over. Obliteration had a new face, and it was human. The audacity, battered, scarred, and venting plasma from a dozen wounds, hung in the quiet dark. It was a testament to function over form, a monument to survival. Slowly, painfully, it turned its nose toward the distant, faint star that marked the way home. Its ugly silhouette, a defined scar against the backdrop of the nebula. They won. When faced with the cold, sterile certainty of obliteration, they simply chose to become it instead. The silence that followed was heavy, profound, broken only by the hiss of a dying power conduit and the soft, ragged breathing of the living. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind the deep, aching exhaustion of a fight that should have been their last. Jaya Lee stared at her console, her fingers hovering over the glowing tactical display. She replayed the final seconds of the engagement, the impossible, frame-shattering pivot, the point-blank volley, the silent, blossoming death of the Sorith flagship. A single bloody tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek, but the look in her eyes wasn't one of sorrow, it was awe. "I've run the numbers, Captain," she said, her voice quiet, almost reverent. "The maneuver, the G-forces alone should have atomized our spinal struts. Physics says we shouldn't be here." Navarre let out a long, slow breath, the sound scraping in her throat. She leaned back in her command chair, the tortured groan of the metal a mirror of her own weary bones. She looked at Jaya, no longer seeing the bright-eyed cadet who joined her crew 2 years ago, but a seasoned veteran forged in the crucible of a single hour. "Physics doesn't account for sheer bloody-minded stubbornness, Jaya," Navarre said, a hint of warmth finally cracking through her iron composure. "That's our department." A gravelly chuckle crackled to life over the comms, a sound of pure, unadulterated vindication. "She's right, kid. Never bet against a human who's run out of options." It was Mac. "And Captain, good news, I've rerouted power back to the coffee maker. Figured we've earned a decent cup after all that suicidal flailing." For the first time since the ambush, a real smile touched Cairo Navarre's lips. It wasn't the wolf's grin of a predator, it was the proud, tired smile of a survivor, of a victor. She looked at the spiderweb of cracks on her main view screen, at the spark still dancing from a ruined console, at the reflection of her own battered crew. They weren't a military unit, they were a handful of miners, mechanics and misfits on a rusty bucket held together by paranoia and spit, and they had just decapitated an Empire's fleet. "Make it a strong one, Mac," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound clarity in the quiet of the bridge. "Then plot us a course for home." The Sorith wanted surrender. They expected fear. They brought cold, logical doctrine to a knife fight and found themselves facing a pack of wolves who set the whole forest on fire just to win. The tale of this day would travel back with the terrified survivors, a story that would infect the sterile databanks of the Sorith collective like a virus. It would be a warning, whispered into the silent halls of their command centers for generations to come. Do not ambush the loud, chaotic primates from the pale blue dot. They don't fight by the rules. Their ships are ugly, their methods are crude, and their souls are forged from iron and rage. They don't know when they are beaten, and when you bring them obliteration, they will simply take it from you and do better.